1, 2, 3, 4. I gave you all I had to give, and I've done the best I can. So now it's up to you to finish what I began. Yes, I will always love you, and I'll be there just for you. So in all that you do, my child, to yourself you must be true. So promise me that you will fight for what it is that you believe. No matter what you do in life, it's in the giving that you'll receive. Wherever the road may take you, those you meet along the way, promise me that you will count your blessings every day.
And a very good evening to you, Jason Hawes. Glad to be here on American Faith today, and kind of amazing that I'm here, quite frankly, as it has been a long time since I've done any kind of a podcast. Almost seems like years in my book, and if you have listened regularly, which I know at least some of you did, or have in the past, it might seem the same for you. And I will explain briefly at least one of the things that has occupied my time, or at least I will try to be brief, but no guarantees. I will probably fail quite miserably, but hey, we can only do the best that we can do. But it is good to be back. It is good to be doing a podcast, even though the subject matter, I don't know if it is so good, but it certainly is in the news. I can tell you, and by the way, it is, as I'm recording this, it is Wednesday evening. It is just after 9:30 here Eastern Time in the U.S. of A., Ohio time, Eastern Time. A lot of people think Ohio is on Central Time, but that weird state to the west of us, Indiana, actually is split. Some Eastern Time, some Central Time. Indiana, they don't know what they're doing over there. But anyway, that being said, it's just after 9:30 on Wednesday evening, July 18th, 2018. And I can tell you, one of the shows that I actually have been trying to work on and trying to put together, and for a variety of reasons, it's just taken more time than I ever thought that it would to put together the kind of show I wanted to do, which it would be very timely, it would be very relevant with everything that comes up in this country today. It would be, or the intention, the goal. The next show that was kind of on the docket and on the agenda, so to speak, was actually going to be a show on immigration from a biblical perspective. Certainly, immigration, illegal and otherwise, mostly illegal, and mostly concerning our southern border, in the news, not necessarily daily, but in the news quite often, and has been in the news very recently with the separation of families and so forth, and the controversy and all sorts of heated debate on both sides of the aisle when it comes to that. And that's, even before we got to that, like I said, this has been a show that I had an intention of doing for some time now, and due to other priorities, other things that I've been spending my time on, either by choice or by necessity, it's just been a slow go to try to put that together, especially the kind of show that I would want to put together, to try to make it as complete as possible, to flow together as well as possible, and to hopefully deliver a good, solid Bible message when it comes to immigration, because there's a lot of opinions on the matter, even dragging the Bible and Scripture into it, and a lot of it still comes down to one's personal views and political persuasions, on the matter, that they then take that with that kind of preconceived bias and leaning and try to make Scripture fit that, sadly. But that's the way it goes, again, quite sadly, when people try to use Scripture to back up or to defend or to validate a political position. Is often Scripture is taken out of context, is misused, is twisted, and again, in saying that, understanding present company very much included, none of us are quite the experts perhaps that we would like to be or like to think we are when it comes to the Bible to start with, but that is a sad reality. And that's a show that hopefully I will do at some point here in the near future. Again, no promises, but it has been an intention of mine. But one of the things I wanted to talk about today, just to let you know what this particular podcast is going to be about, is it will concern, because I've been talking about it. I was talking about it yesterday on Facebook, mostly on my personal Facebook timeline, actually. And it is the summit that President Trump had in Helsinki with Vladimir Putin of Russia, and of course the rather, I don't know, infamous or hotly contested, hotly debated press conference that came afterwards, that our president, again, unfortunately, but sadly very much in character for him, has been all over the map, seemingly staking out a different position of what he said or what he meant to say, that's about 180 degrees different from, this is Wednesday, from Monday to yesterday to again today, to where he has said basically that almost siding with Russia to no, not siding with Russia to again almost siding with Russia. And just I like somebody who I know listens to the show. I was checking out what she said on the message board. Just I like how she put it, actually. Just kind of whichever way the wind blows, that seems to be where this president's mind is at. But anyway, I mentioned I would try to do this briefly. I've already kind of babbled enough, but hopefully this doesn't bore you to tears. If it does, feel free to look me up on Facebook and yell and scream at me. Look up Jason Hawes on Facebook. Look up at American Faith Today. I should have actually probably written down like literal addresses so you can yell and scream at me. But anyway, it's been a while, as I said, since I've done a podcast. And again, part of that busyness with life, to me, it's both an interesting story and it's an unfortunate story and it's a frustrating story. It goes back 2 or 3 months now. And again, this just to explain some of where I've been and why I wasn't even thinking about doing any kind of a podcast or show for a solid month. I was starting to have some car problems, and basically misfire, somewhat random, somewhat sporadic, but very attention-getting at times, where it would be a pretty good misfire. But it was one of those things where I figured, well, it's just going to probably need a tune-up, and I'll try to take care of it when I can find time to take care of it, which, again, with the nature of my job and my work schedule and everything combining, even finding time to have my car looked at sometimes can be a challenge, especially only having one vehicle and using that vehicle literally to make my money with, to right now and for the past 4 or 5 years to essentially make a living on. Very challenging. But anyway, in March, April of this year, going back 3 or 4 months, I was starting to have my vehicle misfire on me. And at the beginning of April, it was on a Monday morning, maybe the first or second Monday. I don't remember how the calendar fell at this point in April of this year. But I do remember it was a Monday morning. I was on my way to work, or I left for work, which for me, it's about a 25-mile commute to work. It takes about a half hour. And I noticed pretty much right away that the car was running rougher than basically ever. But I was still getting where I needed to go. Until about probably 75-80% of the way to work, then it really started sputtering, even shaking, And eventually the check engine light was flashing at me, which, if you don't know, probably most if not all of you do, but if your check engine light is flashing, that's not a good thing. That's usually stop the car immediately or as soon as possible. So I got off on the shoulder of the interstate, turned off the car, called work, told them what happened and that I'd be late, called AAA to have my car towed to the mechanic that I was using at the time, and called my dad to see if he could pick me up and then help me with my job if he had time for basically the rest of the day. And oddly enough, AAA, or the tow truck driver dispatched by AAA, a state trooper, my dad, and somebody I worked with all kind of converged on my vehicle there alongside the interstate roughly at the exact same time. But we got the car on the tow truck. He took it to the mechanic, to the shop I wanted him to take it to, and my dad helped me with work the rest of the day. And I don't remember if it was that same day or the next day, but the mechanic gets a hold of me and he's like, well, it's a 4-cylinder vehicle. He said, well, you have no compression in cylinder 3 and very low compression in cylinder 4, so you probably blew a head gasket. Which didn't make a lot of sense because I was not losing coolant. And I'm like, well, are you sure? He said, well, it's that or it's something internal in the engine. It's like, I can give you a quote for a head gasket and you can decide what you want to do. So he quoted me, said you could easily spend $1,000. I'm like, well, I'll probably try to find another car. So for the next month, again, this from early April to early May, I was on Craigslist, I was on Facebook Marketplace, due to something that happened where I was kind of not having the best of luck and most stable of employment a few years back. I wound up having a bad debt, and so I know my credit score isn't probably that good still, and I'd rather not go into debt if at all possible, which none of us should go in debt if at all possible, borrow money if we can manage to not do that. But anyway, I'm looking for cars. My budget was pretty limited, or pretty narrow, pretty low. But, I figured I could find something hopefully fairly reliable still that I could have for at least a little while. And during this month, I never found a car. I mean, there was cars that I looked at, that I test drove. There were people that I talked to that kind of flaked out on me, and it never worked out. And towards the end of that month's time, the mechanic calls me. He's like, you might want to get rid of your car because the police were on his case about the number of cars. Somebody had complained. The number of cars that were at his place. This was parked alongside the street outside his shop. And he's like, they put a warning sticker on a Blazer that's been here for a while, and they're looking at your car, so they're probably about ready to tag it. So I then go through the adventure of seen can a junkyard tow it? And they said, well, yeah, we can tow it, but we only do towing from 10 to 2, and of course we can't guarantee a specific time that a tow truck driver would be there. And either you would have to be there or an adult would have to be there with the title, and I couldn't really take time off of work to be there, not knowing what time they could meet me or come pick it up. The mechanic and his nephew, they did it together. They weren't always there. Sometimes they would take off and do something, need something that, go after, get a part, get a car, whatever. So that was out. I called AAA. They said, well, we'll tow it, but because we towed it to start with, we won't tow it to your workplace parking lot for free. And the tow truck driver said it'd be $90 plus tax, so that was out. Finally, the store manager says, well, what about one of our customers who works on cars and also has a tow truck? So I call him, and he's like, well, yeah, we'll do it, no problem. Give me a call tomorrow. I call him the next day, 2 or 3 or 4 times, never answers the phone. He calls me or texts me back the following day apologizing. He's like, sorry, I was at probate court all day yesterday, but I'm ready whenever you are. So I give him a call, and he winds up towing it to the parking lot of our store. And he's like, man, if you can fix this car, you probably should if it's not going to be too much. He said, it's a nice